open up your Bibles to Ecclesiastes chapter 6, please. Ecclesiastes chapter 6. And when you read all the things we've been reading in the book of Ecclesiastes, it almost seems like life is just a dead end, right? Yeah, what a downer it sometimes seems. And more than one person, though, in the Bible really becomes as discouraging as this sounds. With life, they either wanted to die or they wish they had never been born. Can you think of anybody? I know you can at least think of one. But what people in the Bible wish they were never born or wish they would have died? And I'm not talking about just anybody, but those that were prophets or men of God. Job is the first one that usually pops in our minds. That's right. Job in chapter 3, chapter 7, wish he'd never been born, wish he would die. Who else? Jeremiah, Elijah. Jeremiah's got that one down here, chapter 8 and chapter 15. Elijah, 1 Kings 19. Who else? Jonah, that is true. Chapter 4, there's one more. Moses. Moses wished he'd die. There in Numbers chapter 11, verse 15. He was just tired of dealing with the Israelites. He was done with it. And what an issue to have to constantly deal with. Even Paul over in the New Testament despaired of life. We were reading about that in 2 Corinthians chapter 8. And the basic problem is that life confronts us with too many mysteries we can't, puzzle out, we can't figure, we can't solve. And for life to really be satisfying, it has to make sense, right? It just needs to make sense. And when it doesn't, we get frustrated. And if people can't see purpose in life, especially when we go through a lot of suffering, we start to question God and even wonder, is life worthwhile? And here in this chapter, Solomon, the preacher, discusses three of life's mysteries. And the first one is riches without enjoyment, there in verses 1 through 6. Verse 1 opens up, there is an evil which I have seen under the sun, and it is prevalent among men. What a seeming tragedy it is to have all the resources for a satisfying life and yet not be able to enjoy it. That's what I'm seeing in all 6 of these opening verses. He opens there in verse 2. A man to whom God has given riches and wealth and honor so that his soul lacks nothing of all that he desires. Well, man, that sounds great. Yet God has not empowered him to eat from them. For a foreigner enjoys them. This is vanity and a severe affliction. More than one person has worked hard and looked forward to that comfortable retirement, seeing the way they hoped things would be, and then all of a sudden, life comes to an end. My mom got remarried to a man named Mike. Good man. He's a good guy. He's been working hard all his life. He seemed healthy. Last time I saw him, healthy as could be. And then in December, they took him in. They said they were going to have to take off his leg. And they took it. And he didn't handle it well. Then they had to take his other leg just past month. And now he's not talking. He's not focused. And they told my mom that they give him about 2 weeks to a month. He had years ahead of him. And now all of a sudden, tragedy. And so the question pops in our minds, why do these things happen? And Solomon mentioned this subject in chapter 5. He hinted at it also to us in previous chapters as well. And to him, it was a basic principle that nobody can truly enjoy the gifts of God apart from God himself who gives the gifts. To enjoy the gifts without the giver, you could say, is idolatry. And it can never really satisfy our heart. Enjoyment without God is merely entertainment. It doesn't satisfy. And verse 2 may describe a hypothetical situation, or maybe it happened to be someone Solomon knew, but the fact that God gave Solomon riches and wealth and honor made, I think, this account even more meaningful, maybe to him, for us. Because how fortunate a person would be to lack nothing, but then how miserable would it be if they could not enjoy the blessings of the life? What would prevent them from enjoying it? Well, maybe trouble at home or illness. Maybe it was death. Maybe the person described in verse 2 had no heir, and so a stranger acquired all that he had. So what good was it? So what is Solomon saying to us? Enjoy the blessings of God now and thank him for all of them. Don't plan to live, start living now. Be satisfied with what he gives you and use it all for his glory. Now, what passage in the New Testament does that remind you of? Be content with what you have. Philippians chapter 4, right? Be content. Paul said, I've learned to be content in all things, and whatever he had, whether it was much or little, he learned the power of contentment. Verses 3 through 6. This is we were talking about this in the Pew Packers. You have a man who fathers 100 children and lives many years, however many they may be, but his soul is not satisfied with good things, and he does not even have a proper burial. Then I say, better the miscarriage than he. For it comes in futility, and it goes into obscurity, and its name is covered in obscurity. It never sees the sun, and it never knows anything. It is better off than he. Even if the other man lives 1,000 years twice and does not enjoy good things, do not all go to one place. So again, as we were saying, I think this got to be a hypothetical case because nobody lives for 2,000 years, and no single married, monogamous marriage is likely to produce 100 children. Rehoboam, here's mine. I was wondering about this. Rehoboam had 88 children, but he had 18 wives and 60 concubines. We see that from 2 Chronicles. But here, Solomon's obviously exaggerating, but he does that in order to make a point. No matter how much you possess, and if you don't possess the power to enjoy what you have, you might as well have never been born. What's the point? That's what he's saying. Do you find enjoyment in the things you have and in the things you do? I talk to other ministers about this quite often. I remember once, and I mentioned this story before, where me, Guy, and a few other guys, we were talking and walking up to Sirius Texas Barbecue in Durango. And as we were walking up, this older gentleman was walking out, and Guy and I saw him, and I said, good afternoon. And he stopped, and he looked around, and he said, it is a good afternoon. We're like, yeah, well, it is. And Guy and I were talking about, that's a fella who enjoys life. He's enjoying the moment he has. Maybe he got a new car. He enjoys the car. I can see him do it. It doesn't matter. Nothing gets him down because he's not worried about tomorrow. He's not thinking about yesterday. He's enjoying what he has. That's a content person. A person who's content with what they have enjoys life because they're not worried about losing it. They're not worried about getting more. They're just, what? Enjoying the life they have. So you have this man with abundant resources and a large family, also in this illustration, both of which, to an Old Testament Jew, these were all marks of God's special favor. But his family does not love him. This man with 100 kids, they don't love him because when he dies, there was no one there. There was no proper burial for him. His relatives stayed around him only perhaps maybe to use what he had, and they wondered when he may die. I don't know, but there he is. And then at the end of his life, who was there for him? The rich man was really poor. And for some reason, perhaps sickness, he couldn't enjoy his money. He couldn't enjoy his large family because there was no love at home. They didn't even weep for him when he died. And Solomon's conclusion was that it was better that this man had never been born because even the stillborn had a better life than he. And among the Jews at the time, well, I don't want to get into that, but verse 4 in the NIV, if you use that, it says, the child comes without meaning, it departs in darkness, and in darkness its name is shrouded. And so Solomon's asking, why did God permit this man to have wealth and a big family if he could not enjoy it? So you can see the downer he's making. Why did he give him these things if he could not enjoy it? How can you enjoy those things? We were just discussing that. by not worrying and trying to accumulate more things in life, but focus on what you already have. Who else, outside of Paul, who else in the Bible was content in whatever situation and with whatever they had? Who was content with what they had? What about Joseph? Do you think Joseph was content in whatever situation with whatever he had? Yeah, he was. He was very content. He didn't try to run away. Whatever situation he found himself in, he worked as hard as he could in that situation. Did he want to get out of prison? He did. But whatever situation he found himself in, he dealt with it the best way he could to the glory of God. The ability to enjoy life comes from where? Where does that come from? Quiet. I know you're thinking God. Yeah, a humble heart from within. That's where it starts. It is a matter of character and not circumstances. Philippians 4:11, not that I speak from want, for I have learned to be content in whatever circumstances I am. The Greek word autarkis, translated content there, carries an idea of self-contained, adequate, or needing nothing from the outside. Paul carried within all the resources needed for facing life courageously, triumphing over all the difficulties. I can do all things through him who strengthens me. All things he could deal with because Christ was with him. That's all he needed. The 2,000-year-old man in our passage and the stillborn baby both ended up in the same place, in the grave. And again, Solomon confronts his listeners with this certainty of death and the futility of life without God. He's getting them ready. He's preparing them for the conclusion of the matter when he gets over there to chapters 11 and 12. The conclusion of the matter is this: obey God, love God, live for him. Verses 7, 8, and 9, I like this one as labor without satisfaction. Look at 7, 8, and 9. All a man's labor is for his mouth, and yet the appetite is not satisfied. For what advantage does the wise man have over the fool? What advantage does the poor man have, knowing how to walk before the living? What the eyes see is better than what the soul desires. This too is futility and striving after wind. So Solomon has spoken about the rich man earlier. Now he's talking about the situation of the poor man. You got the rich and poor alike labor to stay alive. But we must either produce food or we need to either earn money to buy food. But the rich man can let all his money and all his wealth get the work done and get that taken care of for him. But the poor man, he's got to use his muscles, his labor, and work hard for these things, for the appetite. But ultimately, neither one of them is ever satisfied because you're going to always have to buy more. There's always going to need to be more. Why does a person eat? So that they can add years to their life. They continue on. But what good is it for me if that's what I'm after? What good is it for me to add years to my life if I don't add life to my years? What good is that? I have a hummingbird feeder out there in front of our window there in the kitchenette. And I like to sit there, maybe in the morning with my coffee. I'll watch the hummingbirds come and go. The kids enjoy that too. And these birds aren't really living, are they? They're just existing. They wake up. If they sleep long at all, I don't know how the hummingbirds work. They go find food. They get food. They go take it back maybe to the nest of the babies. They come back. They get more food. What else do they do? Do you ever see hummingbirds jogging down the road? Maybe going to the store, buy some groceries. What do? What do birds do? Any bird. What do? Fight. They fight. That's true. I got a bully hummingbird. He doesn't like the other ones to get the food out of it. They just fight over the food. But that's what they do. Day in and day out. They are only existing. yet they are fulfilling the purpose for which God made them. And they even sing about it at times. Now, Solomon is not suggesting that it's wrong either to work or eat, but I think a lot of people enjoy, or many people do enjoy doing both. But if life consists only in eating and working, then we're being controlled by what? Our appetites. And that almost puts us on the same level as an animal, because isn't that true for every animal out there? They sleep, they wake up, and what? Food. That's it. That's their existence. What? Huh? That's right. But that's not exist. That's just existing. That's not life. As far as nature is concerned, self-preservation may be the first law of life, but we are made in the image of God, you and me. We're meant for something far more. In the new creation, self-preservation may well be the first law of death, but there is so much more to it. In Mark chapter 8, somebody want to turn to Mark 8? Gary, would you mind? Turn to Mark 8. Read verse 34 and 38. 34 to 38. What does it profit a man to gain the whole world, to have everything, and yet forfeit his soul? What good is it? That's what he's saying. What good is it? Where are we focusing ourselves? Back over here in Ecclesiastes, both questions in verse 8 are answered by none. For what advantage does the wise man have over the fool? None. What advantage does the poor man have, knowing how to walk before the living? None. None. If all you do is live to satisfy the appetite, then the wise man has no advantage over the fool, nor does the poor man have any advantage to try to better his situation, learning alongside the rich. Solomon is not belittling either education or self-improvement. He is only saying that these things of themselves cannot make life richer. We need to have something greater in life. A century ago, we were starting to experience prosperity and expansion. An American named Henry David warned that men were devising improved means to unimproved ends, he said. And he should see the way things are working today. We can send messages around the world in seconds, but do we have anything significant to say? I'm on Twitter. You guys know that. I like to get on Twitter. And I was thinking about this as I was scrolling through, looking for something really profound and really significant. I haven't found anything on Twitter. I'm sure surely there's got to be a scripture quote in there somewhere, but I haven't come across one. But what do we get? Mick and I were talking about social media. What good does that do our children today? What do you find on there? Anything good? You might find that much. But everything else, and you name it, it's there. Easy to pull up. Cheap entertainment. Stained with violence and all kinds of other garbage. What good does that do for your life? What good does it bring you? Does that bring you closer to God? Is it fulfilling an appetite? Or is it bringing you closer to God? Verse 9. Solomon's version of the familiar saying, a bird in a hand is worth two in a bush. That's what he's saying there with verse 9. What the eye sees is better than what the soul desires. This too is futility and striving after the wind. Dreams have a way of becoming nightmares if we don't come to grips with reality. Have you ever dreamt too big? Is that possible? Let me put it that way, because we always hear that phrase, dream big. You ever hear that phrase? Dream big. I remember one, I won't say who it was. Mick will maybe remember this, but it was years ago. Somebody wanted to raise some money for a special event. And he made a big push. He made a lot of posters, wanted to raise $500,000. What a huge goal. I think he made, in that year, $17,000. And it was just depressing. Could you imagine going and, like at the archway, they have a little chart of how much money they were raising. And one day it was this much of the chart, it was that much, and it never moved. It never moved. Dreaming too big. Not within reality. Is Solomon telling us that it's wrong to dream great dreams or having a burning ambition to accomplish something in life? I don't think he's saying that, but we must take care that our ambition is motivated by what? The glory of God, and not the praise of men, or some sort of self-satisfying goal that's just way beyond our means. Work with what we've got. And if there's more to it, the Lord will put it in there. If we think our achievements will automatically bring satisfaction, we're wrong. True satisfaction comes when we do the will of God. John 4:34, my food, this is Jesus, my food is to do the will of him who sent me and to accomplish his work. My food. Now, why do you think Jesus brings that up a lot? He always talks about food. Because he wants us to think about our appetites. Because that's what most people, that's what drives them. That becomes they're just existing, but they're not living. And what's his food? To do the will of who sent him, and to accomplish his work. And that will bring true joy and true satisfaction. In the will of God, there are riches. There is enjoyment and labor with great satisfaction. But we need to accept his plan for our lives. We need to receive his gifts gratefully. I may never be rich. Do I wish I were? Well, yeah. But whatever I get, I'm content. I'm happy with what I have because the Lord gave it to me. It's a blessing from him. And I use it to, in any way possible I can, to his glory. God enables us. And we need to be able to use each day he gives us, enables us to bring it to his glory. Psalm 16:11. You will make known to me the path of life. In your presence is fullness of joy. In your right hand there are pleasures forever. But it all comes from him, doesn't it? Now look at verses 10 through 11, or 12. Whatever exists has already been named, and it is known what man is, for he cannot dispute with him who is stronger than he is. For there are many words which increase futility. What then is the advantage to a man? For who knows what is good for a man during his lifetime? During the few years of his futile life, he will spend them like a shadow. For who can tell a man what will be after him under the sun? So I want to start there in verse 11. There are times when it seems like the more we discuss a subject, the less we really understood it or understand it. Words don't always bring things to light. Sometimes we say too much and it makes clouds. I know I'm guilty of this. Like sometimes I think I know a passage real well and I start to explain it. Now I'm looking around and I might see faces and I think, well, they look confused. So I'm going to try to explain this a little better. Well, they still look confused. I want to try a little harder. And all I do is make it worse. And I know I've done that. We've all done that, one level or not, some one time or another. Words don't always bring things, to light. But this is where we need the Word of God and the wisdom only he can give us. Have you ever wondered, like you were studying or reading through the Bible and you're wondering about it? We call it, chewing on it for a little while. What does that mean? You're thinking about it. You got it on your mind. You're at work, and maybe you're working out. You got that verse in your mind. You're mulling it over in your mind, and you have it on your mind all day, but you just can't quite figure it out. You go home, you go to bed, and have you ever woken up around 2 or 3 in the morning, and you got the answer? Have you ever done that? Or maybe it doesn't just on the Bible. Maybe not the Bible. Maybe anything. Maybe a school project, or you wake up in the morning and you got it. Why is that? What do you think's causing that? It's your subconscious, right? Because you've put that in your mind. You've been thinking about it so long, your mind begins to work on it. And then when it finally comes in, you got it. You just had to stop and think about it. And sometimes there's so many distractions in our mind, in our life throughout the day, where we don't have time to really devote as much attention to it we want to. But when we go to sleep, our brain is still working on it. Who knows what is good for us? God does. And the wise is the person who takes time to listen to what God has to say. Life may seem to be fleeting. It may be elusive at times, but he who does the will of God abides forever. 1 John chapter 2. The second part of verse 12, does anybody know what's coming next? Does anybody know? What's happening tomorrow? What is tomorrow? Today's Wednesday. What's tomorrow? Thursday, right, Jolene? And what happens tomorrow for anybody? Anybody know what happens tomorrow? My in-laws go home. You watching, Rodney? They're home right now with Jenny. But they've been a blessing to us. What else is happening tomorrow? Anything? Anybody? Will it happen tomorrow? Who knows? Who knows? Could anything change? Oh, yeah. My friend Mike, my mom's husband, he had a lot of plans. They've changed. Because who knows tomorrow? Who really knows? You don't. You may have plans, and there's nothing wrong with planning, but don't focus on tomorrow. Don't focus on it. What should you be focused on? Him. Pleasing Him. And that's where you find joy. I'll never forget the face of that old man coming out of Sirius, Texas, and I said to him, "Good afternoon." He stopped and he looked around. It is a good afternoon. That's a person who enjoys life. He's content with what he has. That's what enjoying life really means. It doesn't mean enjoying life means that you get what you want. Enjoying life means enjoying what you got. I'm happy. I got my children. Jenny, she's recovering. I'm happy about that. Yeah, it was a hiccup with the pain medication, but we got through it. And we live in a country where we can get it if we need it. It was fine. And we're enjoying the life we have and the time we have together. For who can tell a man what will be after him under the sun? So Solomon's discussed two of his arguments, that life is not worth living. The monotony of life, he talks about that, chapter 3, 4, 5. The futility of wealth, also 5 and 6. He has discovered that life under the sun can be monotonous and it can be empty, but it need not be if what? We include God in our lives. Life is God's gift to you and me, and we need to accept what He gives us and enjoy it while we can. And you know what he's doing, what the writer is doing here, he's building us up. And I know that all these chapters, it can be a downer, but he's building us up to bring us to the end of chapter 11, going into chapter 12, but I'm not going to read all that. But there at the very end, he does say this in verse 10, that this was Jonah's memory verse. The preacher sought to find delightful words and to write words of truth correctly. The words of wise men are like goads, and masters of these collections are like well-driven nails. They are given by one shepherd. But beyond this, my son, be warned. The writing of many books is endless, and excessive devotion to books is wearying to the body. The conclusion, when all has been heard, is fear God and keep His commandments, because this applies to every person. For God will bring every act to judgment, everything which is hidden, whether it is good or evil. So what drives your life? Is it your appetite, or is it the Lord? Only you can answer that question.